welcome back to part 7 of this content. And I wanted to come back where we were talking about bait. And I had been referring to the fact that the enemy will try to bait you in your dreams. He'll try to get you to eat things. He'll try to get you to bait you with sex. He'll try to get you to heal. Oh, he comes in. And you have to pay attention to what you're eating. You have to pay attention to how much you're eating. And you have to pay attention to if you have a roof over your head. These are the things that the enemy tries to distract you with. Because if he can get you to eat when you're not supposed to be eating, I'll admit it, the other day I was supposed to be not eating and I ate 2 potato chips. Because I was like, they were in front of me and I had been off and on with not eating things. And I was like, I'm hungry. So I ate them. And then I realized, darn it. And a few moments before, I had them in my hand. I was like, you need to eat till 5 o'clock. I was like, And I still ate them. I did. I got a personal pow in the spirit for that one. But you have to come to a realization that you have to understand what is it that you're standing for and what is more important. What you're standing for, who need you to stand in that position, how you need to stand. And you can't be more what's the word I'm looking for? More driven by your desire to eat, because somebody might need you to stand for them who can't stand for us. It may not be your partner. Maybe you got a ministry like I do. Maybe you got somebody else that needs you to stand in that moment because it's a life or death situation. And you need not be concerned about whether you're eating or not. Or how much you're eating. I see some people, they get so concerned. It's like, well, I'm losing all this weight. There are ministers that will sit and do 60, 90, 100 days, 200 days. Because it's necessary for what it is that they need to do. They'll mix it up the way that they do it. But guess what? They're going to do however many and however long the Lord needs them to do it. Because it's necessary for what it is that they're trying to break. But see, a lot of people give up in the middle of the process. And you need to have that understanding that the Lord is covering you. The Lord is covering you even when you don't have a husband. And sometimes your husband is covering you in the spirit. So you have to understand what that is. Because what it is that you're putting your hands to, if you are not spiritually aware as to what it is that the Lord's trying to show you that he needs you to cover in that season, everything you put your hands to, that if you aren't spiritually aligned to it, I was literally just listening to this in the break-in between broadcasts. They were talking about the fact, the minister was literally talking about how, and that's probably why I was listening to it so I could share with y'all, that you have to pay attention to the fact that what are you listening to, how are you feeling yourself, the things that you're feeding yourself, that you are being covered. And the more that you are spiritually filling yourself with the words, filling yourself, sitting in the presence of the Lord, praying, seeking out God, consecrating in that space, you can avoid attacks. Because that will prevent you from putting your hands to things that you don't need to be putting your hands to, even in relation to your God-ordained spouse. Ooh. Because God knows the assignment he done gave that man. You might not know, but God knows that he knows what he's supposed to be doing. Some of y'all out here thinking that your spouse is stupid in the spirit, but they ain't stupid as you think they are. Some of them, they couldn't have made it as far as they did in the industries that they called to be in if they wasn't smart in the spirit. I'm just telling you. And why do you think God would allow them to cover you if they were that off in the spirit realm? Understand that the enemy is alluring. Remember what I said about Hosea in 2 and 14. He wants to allure you. He wants to do a spell work on you. And he wants you to... Oh, look, it's another ambulance. Name her spiritual emergency. It's a spiritual content of the attack because it's strategic in order to stop you. Pay attention. Because it will pull you away from your business and siphon your money. That was 2 ambulances. Broke people have the wrong relationship with money. And some people, this is even key point to what I was saying, the way that you worry about money will worry it right out your hands. Something going wrong in your business, you will worry that thing. You know that there are people, and I've seen it happen over and over and over again, when a person takes the time and steps away from the business, they make more money in the time that they step away from the business in the time that they were sitting over it, lording over it. Why? Yes, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and manipulate, but he'll use your own mouth against the very thing in order to get you to use your mouth to manipulate, to steal from yourself, and to lie. The enemy within you is a trip. He'll try to use it to trip you up. We already talked about sowing and sowing back in, but you also have to repent for the things in which you have done, because sometimes you do it, whether it be unforgiveness, whether it be certain things that you put your hands to. You must come out of alignment and agreement with those spiritual things in order to break it and trying to desperately project. You must make sure you're not projecting. People will project upon you, but you cannot project back what the enemy is desiring through your own words, word curses that even you speak over the very thing that God's trying to bless you in. Did I not remind you once before? Let me remind you of the 7 to 11 areas. Okay? He comes at you through your eyes, your nose, your mouth, what your hands do, your ears, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, and financially. This is how he comes at you. He never changes. If you cover each and every single one of these areas and keep them covered, it will prevent you from going into an attack. When I keep these areas covered, I'm at peace 90% of the time. And I remain aware, and I can usually pinpoint and discern, oh, that was an attack against my ears. That was an attack. That was a word curse. Oh, I'm not supposed to be eating that. That was an attack against what I put in my mouth. Oh, that was an attack. I smelled something in order to try to get me to crave something, in order to get me to... What I'm seeing out my eyes or not seeing. What I'm putting my hands to or not putting my hands to. Because you got to be careful, because you could actually end up spiritually injuring yourself. You have to be willing to agree with the assignment that has come against you. And if you come into agreement with it, it can bring a hindrance to your momentum to move forward, especially if you're moving with a partner. what it is that you and your partner are putting their hands to. How many times have I told you? What do I always say? If your partner stops moving forward and you're moving, you're going to fall flat on your face. If your partner's moving forward and you can't keep up with him, he's going to drag you. This is why a 3-strand cord is not that easily broken, because God will keep you both in pace with each other. But if you're moving in your own right and they're not moving, then neither one of you are getting nowhere. Remember what I said about the person that's sitting still and you moving and you just want to keep operating around in circles, and that's what the enemy wants to catch you up in? Well, that's an attack the enemy will also use against your marriage, to try to get one of you to sit still while the other one is trying to move. So you can only make it but as far as the other person is moving, because you are two in one. If they're not moving, you can't move. If you're not moving, you get drugged. And the point is to take your legs out from under what you're putting your hands to and building in this season. You must stay in your lane and not become distracted by what's going on around you. People, places, situations, and scenarios. Because what the enemy will do is if he can't attack you, he will attack people around you. And it's through their confusion that they're dealing with to try to derail you. Keep your eyes within your field. Do not go in to the enemy's house. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks about a governor, and a governor trying to bribe people with, I can't think of the particular scripture, but we see this happen in politics all the time. Gifts that they give to try to bribe others. This is unlawful practices, unethical practices, and this is how the enemy works. Because if you take the bribe, it thereby is a legal hindrance against you, and you have to give said gift back. And 9 times out of 10, when it's the enemy, that gift is cursed in some way. What was I going to say? They want to be or have access to the things that you are putting your hands to, in order to stop you from having momentum. Because if they can have access to what you are putting your hands to, they can stop and or hinder it, tarnish and or taint it, or do something to it. Remember I said Ezra 4 through 6. Ezra chapter 4 through chapter 6. This is what they want in order to be able to access the things that you're putting your hands to. When you go into the enemy's territory, it creates a time warp, okay? And that makes it hard for those things that are supposed to be a protection for you to get to you. So as you are entering into a new thing, spiritually you won't get there first. But physically, the time warp is the spirit coming into the natural. Matthew 6, the prayer, my kingdom come, my will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It has to get from heaven to earth. And we are in the season, Luke 12 and 55, that the south wind is blowing, and it is coming to pass now that the heat of the inertia of that thing coming from heaven being brought into the earth for the truth of the manifestation of God's will. But it has to get here first. And there is a delay or a time warp in the differentiation of that manifestation. So with that being said, if a person is operating in the wrong spiritual context, and a lot of Westerners this is what I talked about in the other word when I was talking about a lot of people are not willing to do the work. If you're not willing to do the work, you will not see the fullness of the manifestation of what it is that God is trying to bring you in this time and in this season. And because of that, most Westerners are codependent, so they will prefer much more than to operate in a level that would stop, or they would prefer to stop somebody that is doing the work because it shows that they aren't willing to do the work. Or if they are willing to do the work, they ain't going to be willing to do it for as long as it takes for it to be done. A lot of people aren't willing to fast. A lot of people aren't willing to pray as long as it is that the Lord is saying to pray. A lot of people aren't willing to wait for their God-ordained spouse. A lot of people cry for that individual. It's like, oh, I'm not getting it. Why hasn't it shown up? Blah, 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 blah. I hear people crying about it after a year. It's like, what about those of us that had to sit and wait 3, 5, 7 years? Some people gave up on their spouses because it took them too long to change their mind. There's some spouses, for the simplest things, would take them 20 years to change their mind. Are you willing to wait? Remember when Naomi was making the point of saying if she had gotten pregnant at that particular time, would we be willing to wait 10 to 20 years? Well, not 10, but 20 years for her to give birth to another child and that child to grow up. Some of y'all have been waiting for your promises to mature. I need you to hear me with your spiritual ears and your financial ones too. Some of you have been waiting for that thing to mature, and when the wealth transfer occurs, it's going to be more than you expect because it matured. It was managed right. It accumulated. The financial equity, the reserves, the interest that made it multiples of 7 times 7 times 7. That's what you were waiting for, the maturation of that 7 times 7 times 7. Because if they gave it to you when you first saw it, in that first year, you'd only gotten 7. But God's like, nah, I'm going to wait 7 years so that when you get it, you'll get 7 times 7 times 7. But a lot of people ain't willing to wait because the enemy's attacking you and all this kind of stuff. But that the Lord allows in order for you to learn how to handle it, because if he didn't allow the enemy to attack you, when you get to the level he's trying to take you to, you ain't even going to recognize an attack when it comes to you. You're not supposed to entertain strange communications. If somebody is coming to you with wrong motives business-wise, trying to get you and your husband to get involved in certain types of dealings, you need to be able to have a spiritual ear to be able to hear that doesn't sound right. Why does that not sound right? Then you need to take it into the spirit realm with God and pray over it for 24 hours at least. So can I come back to you in 24 hours? Let me sit on that. Now, sometimes it'll be a scenario God's like, yeah, I'm going to give you 24 hours. In some cases, it may be a Joseph situation that you will have to have that prayer in that moment. And you're going to get that answer in that moment. But the Lord, for certain things, he will allow you to get the wisdom, and he will pour out the wisdom within that 24-hour period, that when you come back to it, The revelation will be there, but some people ain't willing to stand and wait for that. Everybody's like, oh, now. Oh, I'm going to do this now. Oh, I'm trying to get this done immediately. The one thing about God is he always gives you a way of escape. But some things you may not have to deal with trying to escape if you put it before God in the first place. Are you understanding what I'm saying? You have to be able to understand these things. For the issue is not the fact that you are being rich, it's the love of it or idolizing it. That's the issue. Many people are offended with the topic of wealth. Many people don't want to talk about wealth. Many people don't want to think about wealth. Many people don't want to occur wealth because of the fact that it takes work to harvest the wealth. Even if it's working in a field that you enjoy, it still takes work. But the thing about it is, if you know how to position yourself properly, you can occur that wealth and not have to do as much work, because the work that you do in this season will prepare you for your next season. In that season, you may not have to work. There's an entire scripture that talks about in the Sabbath that they stored up for 5 years so that when the 6th through the 8th year came, they could rest. The ground rested, and they ate off of what it was they had previously. But if you're not storing up, it's like the women who had oil in their lamps. The 5 foolish virgins burnt out all their oil, but the 5 wise virgins stored up their oil. And then you had the women that lost their oil, and they sitting up there, I gotta go get more oil, and they moved out of position because they had to go get oil, while the ones that sat there, they was good. As soon as the door opened, they were standing right there, and the other ones got locked out. A wise man will stand up and put his foot down to another man that is positioning himself in between you and your relationship. What am I saying? If your husband is a wise man, he will be discerning enough to see when the enemy is trying to attack your relationship. And he will use the boldness that is within him to be able to, because you need to know that you're protected, right? If you see another man attempting to approach you inappropriately, you can go to your husband and be like, babe, I don't feel safe with this individual. I'm going to need for you to help me address this thing and make your presence known. Now, in some cases, some men that had previous relationships where women would purposely start confusion with ex-lovers or lovers that they were actually cheating on that man with to cause confusion, and then call that man a wimp because he didn't do or defend them. But they were causing confusion in their relationship. But a real woman, she gonna come and be legitimate with this person. I don't feel safe around this individual. If you don't understand that, let's take it before the Lord and let the Lord show you that this is something that needs to be taken care of, and how we as a couple will take care of it. You never need to allow confusion in. And what will happen is the Lord will either allow your husband to address that situation and confront it, or he's going to confront it so that your husband, one, can see the evidence that this was an issue in the first place. Exposure. and that it can be addressed for the benefit of the situation. But sometimes what the Lord will do is the Lord will allow the confrontation to come between you and that individual and your spouse, because your spouse, in all actuality, he's trying to strengthen his boldness to speak up for himself, to defend you, to defend himself. So he may allow your husband to end up in a scenario. Your husband's not going to get hurt or anything like that, but he just wants him to speak his truth. You know, some situations that the devil will only come up to you to see if you will address him. What does it say in the word? When you confront the enemy, he shall flee from you, right? Sometimes that's all he's looking for. Confront it. When you confront it, it diffuses itself. You must speak, and you must speak loudly. Don't let your voice get muted. Somebody else made this point. I think it was Yanni Nev. She made the point of saying, you're coming into a season where you're going to be around high-powered people, and you need to understand how you are supposed to handle being in these rooms, in these realms with these people. Understand where you're supposed to take direction from your spouse, but also understand that you are supposed to submit to your husband's leading, but you cannot allow other people to believe that they have power over your voice. A lot of us have had to deal with being muted in our life and our lifestyle. And because we were muted, we were not able to speak and or share our opinion in relation to certain things. And in some of these cases, you're going to be in high pressure situations, and people are going to have their eyes on you, and they are, and God's looking at, what are you going to say? And what are you going to do in that situation? And the lights and the cameras and the things are going to be on you. And you're going to have to seek God for wisdom. The best thing that I can say to you is, if you're going out into public arenas and places, before you step out on those stages, before you step out in them places, tell the Lord, take a hold of my tongue, put a coal to my lips, put the words in my mouth. I can't tell you how many times I've been in situations where, whether I was going to a job interview or what have you, that the Lord took control of my mouth. There were things I said out my mouth in that interview that I do not know where it came from. I know it wasn't me. Let the Lord have control, and he will bring the words out your mouth that are appropriate, that need to be said in that situation. And you will know the words to speak, and the situation will diffuse itself. The enemy will hang a level of pressure over your head. Don't try to fit in to make it your point, but make it your point to stand out. When I was a kid, I used to be the one that my friends would be like, they hid behind me, which I used to wonder why. It's like the big tall person would come up and they'd be like, hey, would you be, and they hiding behind me, and I just say, could you please move? And they moved. I'm like, really? This is why the enemy used to bully me as a kid, because it's like he tried to intimidate me. And now as an adult, I'm like, really? Now I see dealing with spiritual warfare, and I now understand what I was dealing with as a child. The enemy don't like you. But you have to understand that the enemy can be diffused. He only comes to present himself as a roaring lion. But if you know how to speak to him properly, he'll back off you. He will. But you must be discerning. Don't forget the lessons that you learned in the wilderness when you go into these new places, because you're going to be in a new place, but you got to understand that you're going to have people that are going to approach you the same way that they approached you back then. And you got to keep your eyes and ears open, because it may look different, but it's still there. And don't get lackadaisical and forget what you learned, because the training you learned, it's like when you went to school. Everything you learned in high school, you had to do in college. It was just a different level. And you have to understand that if you try to fit in with the people because you want to be friends, I've come to the realization, they may hate me. If they end up hating me, oh well. I'm not going there to be loved. Weak people try to fit in. Strong people desire to stand out. But understand that strong person desiring to stand out will probably be hated by the weak people, because you showed the weak people who they really were. And they hate you for it because you showed the differentiation, and they're going to try to project and suppress and mute and do all of this to calm you down because you showed them who they were. You have to take analysis, you have to cross-check, and you must double-check, because there are going to be red flags that you need to pay attention to, and you need to heed those red flags because you went through these trials before. And if you don't want to have to go through repetitive cycles again, recognize them when you first see the issue. Know your enemy is consistently trying to find a way back in, and he needs to be continually shut out each and every single time. Understand it, recognize it, take the witness and the warning and take heed to it, because that is your confirmation, and that confirmation will prevent you from having to deal with something worse later on. Don't go anywhere outside of the people and the places that you're supposed to be associated with and in relation to. You will run into warfare and people and attacks that you should not have to deal with. Okay? Remember, you are protecting the baby. Don't accept invitations unless the Lord gave you permission to go there. And I will come back for more in the next part.